Hello and welcome to Mediums in Action with me, Martin Jeffrey, and another medium, Ian Doherty. We decided this year to start our own podcast, not like one that you normally listen to, but a nice conversation between two friends who are very knowledgeable about mediumship, the consciousness, and psychic ability. We want to break down these borders that we put up to stop ourselves from learning psychic ability or mediumship. And we thought the best way to do this is have a general discussion in each podcast about various subjects, some that will be put forward by ourselves, and we're hoping that you, the listener, will also contact us and talk to us about what subjects you'd like to hear as well. To start off with, our first podcast is, I'd say it's podcast 0.0, and what that means is it's our own story, our own beliefs. I thought we'd start from the beginning, so I asked Ian to tell us his story about how his mediumship blossomed.
Yeah, I was as a medium, or being aware of what I was able to do was as very much as a child, and I can recall, at school I was a bit of a sort of a loner, to be honest. I kept myself to myself. Well, a loner is probably a strong word. I was what you'd call it, introverted. I had a very, very marked speech impediment, as you can tell, and some of the words if I think about them. So that's why I kept myself to myself. But I feel, in hindsight, that actually helped me to reinforce that empathy, compassion, and passion, which enables you to be, to work mediumship. It's a very integral part. But I used to see people walking around the house, who nobody else could see. I did a bit of past life regression, or well, not a past life. I did a bit of regression to a younger age, when I was maybe 7 or 8. I could see my mum sat on a chair. She was crying. My nana was trying to calm us down. We were all there, all the kids. My youngest two sisters went. So that would put me around about 4, maybe 5 years of age. And I could see this woman who appeared to me to be hiding behind the curtains, but half in the wall and half out. And I thought, why can't anybody else see her? What's that lady doing? And yet nobody even noticed her, So there's little things there. And I would regularly see a little old lady on my bed, and it just escalated from there, And I was scared of the dark until I would say about maybe 13 or 14, and my mum used to take me to bed before 7, before it started getting dark. Otherwise, I just wouldn't sleep. And then I ended up going into the forces when I was 18, come out of my shell immensely, met some beautiful people, and being into the situation now where it's given me confidence. I can stand in front of people, I can talk. I was a senior non-commissioned officer, and I could be telling people to do this, to do that, ordering about. So that really helped me, and that's when my mediumship really, really did kick off, and certainly through a development circle at Spiller's Church, but then having a phone conversation with you, are you interested in the paranormal? And I've never really heard about it, Yeah. Doing a ghost investigation, I thought, what the hell's this? And so I thought, well, I'll take a risk. I always have done. And that in part led me to, or give me the sort of purpose. Yes, this is the way I'm on. I ended up leaving the RAF and doing the paranormal work, doing the mediumship on a full-time basis, and this is where we are now.
Wow! How did your family, or how did your mum how did she see your paranormal experiences, or did you never discuss them?
I was, to be honest, it's a very interesting topic, one where I think added to my fear. And I can think in the past now, we were brought up as Catholics until I was about 14 or 15. So, this was a taboo topic. And my mum would sit us all around. She'd tell us about Jesus being nailed on the cross. I used to break into tears thinking, they've nailed that man up for nothing. Do you know what I mean? Really.
Yeah.
But then,
I think back to Sunday school, and I think some of the stories, and my family was sort of Methodists, so it's funny really, because it was all sort of blood and thunder, and kind of hearing these horrible stories. he died for us, and Saint Peter of so and so was stoned to death, but he was happy because he died for us.
Yeah, I know. I can't fathom it, but it just shows, I think, in everybody's background how faith or the way they're brought up with parents and social interactions with school and and their peers can really have a bearing on our life.
Well, I think for me, as I said, I kind of, there was a Christian hint there, there was a sort of Methodist hint there, and we were only Methodists purely because that was the local church.
Yes.
But by the time I got to sort of 12 and 14, I was already questioning Christianity or questioning belief, and what kind of rocked my sort of belief really was, I always remember I was sat in a church one Sunday, and next to me was my friend's mum, and she was talking in tongues, which is just utterly, it sounds like utter gibberish. And I said to my friend, I said, "Oh, what's your mum doing?" And he said, "Oh, she's talking in tongues. God is kind of speaking through her and that sort of thing." And I thought, that's amazing. And about 3 or 4 days later, I was at my friend's house, and I could hear this noise, and I thought, I wondered what it was. And I went into the kitchen, and I heard the exact same noise, and it was my friend's mum washing the pots, and it was obvious that she was practicing speaking in tongues.
Ah, I see.
And I stood there and I thought, right, okay. And it had a real imprint. It kind of made me question things, and so it's interesting that, we're both kind of from a semi-religious background, and I suppose spiritualism to you, I mean, being a spiritualist is religious. I mean, do you see it as a religion for you?
I used to be honest. When I first started, the first principle, it's the fatherhood of God, and I thought, yeah, almost, no, but I thought there was a God element, and of course, in a spiritualist church, it's a service, there's prayers and there's songs, so I can understand it in that view. But meeting you, and certainly the influence that my guide William has, I've gone away from thinking of it as a faith based. More into try and understand both sides of the coin, the scientific side as well as the faith-based and what the mediumship is. So my outlook has changed. I don't see myself as being, having a faith. I see it more of having certainly a way of life, but of a more changed into philosophy rather than a sort of a faith. And that's what's changed for me.
It's like when we was talking about the starting of Ascentia 2, where we talk about the psychical sciences. So we're talking about the peripheries of science, or the science of the psychical subject. So to me, again, it's philosophy driven. But it's also about exploration, and it's also, a nod to the science involved in this. We're not scientists by any means, but you're doing a course now, and do you want to talk about the course?
Yeah, it was funny how it came around. It was very much spirit driven, because I just thought I wanted to do something. I'm in a situation where as a medium, I'm very, very visual. I'm very clairvoyant orientated. And I could see colours around people, which I understood was the aura. But then I started thinking, there's something wrong with that colour, and I started saying to people, I said, "Oh, you've got a trapped nerve in your shoulder." I said, "How did you know that?" I said, "Well, it's what I feel." And then I got talking. I thought myself, this is really there. Then William stepped up. That's my guide who came in. Really, I would say probably about 2001, 2002, talking to me there, and it was very much his sort of drive, I do feel, because I had a woman who came round to have a private readings, and then she was part of one of my home circles, and she mentioned to me, "Why don't you do an Open University course?" And I thought, well, I don't feel I've got the I've got an RAF pension. I don't feel I'll qualify for this. I tried to talk myself out of it, to be honest. I was a bit scared of science, and then the way it came about, she said, "Well, I will send you some information." And then about 30 seconds after she'd gone from the house. She'd come knocking on the door, and I thought, "What's up? What's up? Come on, come in, calm down." I thought she'd been, either somebody tried it on with it or whatever.
Wow.
And then
Yeah.
she said, "No, no, I've just had." And I was just checking my emails, on my phone as I was walking to the car, and I had an email to my dad's account. Now, bear in mind, she came to see me because she wanted to talk to her dad, who'd been passed almost a year. Yeah, and there was an email to her dad's account on how to saying basically how to apply for an Open University course loan. And I thought, you're kidding
Wow.
me, you know what I mean? She goes, "No, I can't understand it." So I followed it through, and I'm doing a health sciences, on to do with the mind, the way the body works, how the cell structure. It goes really deep into it, and William is chomping at the bit. I want to get this finished. Let's get on with this. Let's get on with that, and I feel the work that we're entering into now is also spirit driven, but with the hindsight, it's been going this way since, and I feel, excuse me, and I feel even now that it is spirit driven. My William's talking to me now. He said this was always going to be the way, and how it was that me and you met, that phone call, and where we are now is all leading to that. So for the past 15 years or so, certainly since our phone call in 2003, we've been steered, I do feel, or led to this point where we are now.
I always remember you saying it was only when you looked back in your ghost hunting reports, because you used to write a report of what you were sensing,
I did, yeah.
that you suddenly realised that William had actually been appearing or making himself known at many other venues.
It's interesting because I noted him at several locations. The ones I can recall off my mind are Dudley Castle and the Woodchester Mansion, and I recorded him in detail because at that time I was doing that, and I'd say, yes, he looked like this, his height, everything, his beard, the lot, and then I did a database for about 5 years, and I coalesced all the information of what I've seen. I cross-reference it, having been a analyst, I was analysing what I've got, and then I realised, hang on a minute, and William appears 7 times, that I've seen him 7 times, walking about and interacting with me and the group, by way of saying this, and when I started, I started trance back, I think it's about 2004, I think. I'm not quite sure. I'd have to look at my diary or two, but I've just been told it's two.
I remember it was around 2004. I
Yeah,
remember you telling
yeah,
me.
the group leader, or the tutor rather, of that trance group, she was mentioning, and recording everything that we said, on one of those tapes. And William came through and spoke to me and said, I was looking for a medium to do some work with. I wanted somebody who had a greater intelligence than the medium I'm talking through now, but he liked the way I documented my ghost things, so he said, yes, that man will do. I thought, well, thank you.
And how productive it's been over this last 10 plus years, 10,
Yeah,
13 years.
definitely. Looking at the way that you've taught me a lot of things, and I think it's fair that when I first started, the paranormal, I was very, very naive. I hadn't got a clue what it was, and I just thought it was nice, and not pay you a compliment for the sake of a compliment, but you've got me to look at things. You know what I mean? You got me to question things, and I just want to say thank you, because it really is nice that now I don't take things at first value. I'll go and do the research and see what it means to me, because if I don't understand something, I've got to research it so I get that more sort of in depth. But that's my personality, really. But yeah, you said you've taught me a lot, Martin.
Oh, well, thank you, Ian. Thank you, and same with you as well. It's been interesting. I think it comes back to seeing the woman practicing speaking in tongues, where that was a turning point. Where,
yeah.
I mean, sort of my background was, when I was a child, I had a lot of weird experiences. We lived in, I would say we lived in haunted houses, but the likelihood is that I was very mediumistic and I was seeing things or experiencing things. The houses were probably just normal houses, but to me they were haunted because I saw a grey lady. I've told the story a few times where I saw the grey lady in the pram. But the real turning point was the second house we lived in. We moved in there, and it was a very, very strange house. It was a mid-terrace. It was social housing. There was nothing out of order from it. It was no different from 3 or 4 houses that were in that area. So it was nothing special. But when we moved in, I always remember the first thing that ever happened was I was laid in bed and I felt an itch in my back. And as I reached round, there was a hand and a finger was poking me in the back. And it wasn't an itch, it was that. I grabbed it and it pushed through my hand and pushed through, and I screamed and woke up.
Wow.
And then for the following, we lived there until I was 15, and all the way through that time we had various experiences. We could hear footsteps. Every Friday at 7 o'clock we always heard a baby cry, and yet there was no babies in our house, there was no babies next door, but it was always at 7 o'clock you heard this baby cry. It was a recording, and all this sort of stuff really intrigued me, and I ended up running small little ghost hunting clubs at junior school and senior school, and my friend, me, Simon and Trevor, we used to go ghost hunting. I had no idea we were doing, so I joined the ghost club and ASAP, and I started going to places because I wanted to know exactly, I wanted to do it properly, because going ghost hunting around your school in the middle of the night with a cross really isn't productive for anyone.
No,
so.
It is it.
From there, it kind of led into various other things, investigations, meeting amazing people like Andrew Green, Peter Underwood. But underlying all this was the feeling that I could see things that other people couldn't. And from a young age, my mother used to go to spiritualist churches. So we would go to one in central Sheffield on Trippet Lane, which is a very well-known one. We used to go there, and I used to sit at the side of the stage from a young age, and I used to watch that. So I've always been kind of balancing this, the investigative side and the researching side with also the mediumship side. And the mediumship side has literally, it's taken a fall for over this last 10 years, and it's been stronger, and I think what it is I've allowed myself that breathing time not to be so skeptical, and just to see where it goes if I let it go. It's almost like letting a wild horse go and see what happens. And actually, instead, what it's provided me is more evidence that I am in touch with spirit, that I'm able to give people readings, I'm able to do divination, I'm able to do these amazing things. And with yourself and, research, I'm intrigued to see where it comes from. Where does it exactly come from? Is there a spirit world? Is there, when I die, am I going to go to a bar with Elvis and Marilyn Monroe and all this? I mean, what's your feeling on spirit world?
Well, I do believe that there's a life after this life, whether people call it heaven, Valhalla, whatever, because, I don't think whilst we're in the physical body we can prove that there is an afterlife, because people will consider somebody, the sky is not blue, it's actually black, it's only blue because of the sun's ultraviolet and the ozone, making it that way. But if somebody is pertinent, no, it's definitely blue, you can't change their mind, so to them you can't give proof. So I feel with the evidence that I've had throughout my life and the many messages that I've given to people and have had given to me, Lord leads me beyond doubt, without any doubt whatsoever, that there is something that does exist after the physical life. I've talked to my guys, I said, have you ever seen God? And they always say, well, no, but there is something here. There's an energy. There's something here, but we have not yet seen God. So I do feel whether it's, I don't think there's an adequate word from it, because I feel that God is a man-made. We've done this through, and when I say we, humankind, not just men, I don't want to be sexist in that last thing. When we talk about, I think we need to put labels onto everything, you know what I mean? So there must be a God, because we don't know what else to call it, and goes back from the dawn of time, where used to sacrifice to the tidal waves, the volcanoes, so they wouldn't happen again. So I feel that's where gods have come from, because it's something that we can't see, and it's more powerful than us. So, I think we just give it a name, in all honesty.
I think it's one of those things where, as you say, it probably started at the very basics of, very beginnings of humanity, where to try and understand what was happening around them, like volcanoes or simple things like death or fire or whatever. Then people attributed gods and that sort of thing. And for me, I think you're right in the basis is that we do not have the imagination to imagine what is after death, that we have to visualize it in physical terms. So hence why people imagine that St. Peter stood on some gates waiting for you to go in. Where if you look at various religions, from Hinduism to Buddhism to Christianity, and it all seems to suggest that there is... I think how I'd like to say is there is a collective consciousness, that consciousness comes together, and again, my imagination will not stretch to how that works, how it appears to us, because I'm thinking in 3D physical terms. But I think definitely there's that evidence that somehow the consciousness continues, and if you look at the research of Dr. Robert Lanza and some of the work that's attributed to him and also linked to him, you've also got the mapping of the universe that's happening at the moment. And the scientists, as soon as they saw the mapping of the universe and how it's branched out, it literally looks like cortex in a brain. It's got a little electronic charges and sparks, and you've got the suns, and you've got. I think it's only a matter of time before we realise that the universe is actually some form of consciousness. It's maybe that's where we go back to, and Robert Lanza is doing the research on the spark within the brain that disappears when we pass away, and how that could be linked to consciousness. It's fascinating times, I think.
Oh yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. I like the way you put that over, the consciousness within the universe, because there must be. William once said to me, I think it was on the long, because there was a young man asking me, how is it that we can, do this, and what happens when went into all these deep questions about physical mediumship and this, that, and the other. And William said, well, the laws of science that pervade the physical world do not exist, that cross the barrier. And he did mention across the barrier. He didn't say veil or anything there, but it doesn't work in their world. It works here because it's a physical thing. And the one thing that Spirit do say, or have said through readings, through philosophy, is that the spirit world, if you can call it a spirit world, is very much about thought, as when you're working with your guides, it's mind to mind. So everything is thought. I'll think and I'll be there. I'll see and I can see. So there's no confines that are in the physical body. If you want to go somewhere, you think about it and you're there. So I think it's a world of thought, and that gives credence, I do feel, to the conscious universe, because it's all about thoughts.
It's interesting because you've got science as religion at the moment, where anything that a scientist says is somehow deemed as being almost like religious dogma, and that is utterly untrue. Because you have a look around, and you've got a scenario where you've got scientists who seem to be following the old method, so they will not step out of a particular border. Okay, so they just stick to what we imagine science does. Okay,
yeah.
And then you've got people like Dr. Robert Lanza. You've got various places like, I always remember the Nordic Sciences, which is still an institute in America. Again, they're researching how we can work with binaural beats and how we can expand the mind, how we can push consciousness. Yeah. And it seems that a lot of that sort of knowledge is shoved down because it's not mainstream. It's not, most people imagine science tells you whether drinking coffee is good or bad for you, when actually, science, I saw something the other day where people say science is real. And that's utterly wrong, because science is, theory after theory to try and prove something.
It's just theory.
And I think that's where mediumship is, and mediumship and psychic ability. I think that's where the whole subject is, where at the moment you have this very sort of, you either have the utter fringe, the people who are believing in the unicorns and conversing with entities that simply don't exist, and then you have like a scientific community who, like Richard Wiseman or Chris French, who are trying to disprove that paranormal exists.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I don't think there's too big of a conversation between them both.
No, I think they're setting their own parameters. It's got to fit into this. If it doesn't, it's wrong, or vice versa. It's just the same that never the twain shall meet. You know what I mean? It's always going to be difference of opinion. It's at times it's like what you call it, Lilliput, open the egg at the wrong end. You know what I mean? They just won't compromise, and I think that's where faith can be very, very rigid, and science can be very, very rigid. And I just feel here it'd be nice if through that collective consciousness, which I do feel in the future wise, people will be able to link into naturally and have thoughts or get thoughts from someone else, and then you can sort of link it up, and this is what the whole world is thinking of, and perhaps we can, it's a little bit like Highlander, you know, where they were having that consciousness. I can see what all people, I know what all people are thinking, and I put bloke A in contact with bloke B in contact with woman C, and it's all sort of linking on the same way, you know. So I feel that we will be able to link into that consciousness and hopefully push science and get the answers.
You only have to look at things like Buddhism or some of the ancient Eastern techniques. You only have to look at things like various ceremonial magic treaties, and for years they've been saying that they've been in touch with higher entities. Higher consciousness, higher knowledge. That again, my sort of background with magic, essentially a magician is somebody who wants to better themselves through knowledge, through experimentation, through trying to contact your higher self. Mm-hmm. And it's no different than what mediums are doing, or certainly what myself and Ian are doing. Ian with his course, and we've started Essentia too. And what we're trying to do is really remove the fluff from mediumship and the subject. So I suppose we're trying to be in the middle of science and the middle of the fluff brigade, as I call them.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good thing there, and I love that word fluff. It's brilliant.
Yeah, well, as you know, I mean, myself and Ian's had a huge amount of discussions about various courses that we've seen over the last 5 years that have appeared, and the turning point was this unicorn course, which I'll tell you about. And we saw a very well-known place of study for mediums, and the whole course was about meeting the royal family of unicorns, going into trance and bringing through a unicorn, and then finally having a message from the king of all unicorns from the royal family. And I couldn't believe it. And now, unicorns, this is where you have to apply scientific thought and research. Your unicorns are probably a misidentification of a rhino by early explorers. I mean, you go on Wikipedia, go on any place at all, and you will find evidence that what unicorns are. And yet here is a guy teaching people, and people are paying tickets to go into trance with a unicorn. I mean, what do you think happens during that time? What do you think that person believes they're bringing through?
To be honest, there must be in part a willingness to believe, because as many people do, they believe in leprechauns, pixies, fairies, you know, otherworldly things, you know, which we can be talk about on another blog perhaps, you know. But I think if the person believes that is what's taking place, then I feel that their mind believes they're talking to a sort of unicorn, when it could be a guiding influence or a family member from spirit giving them some personal details to say, oh yes, the unicorn knows about me. So they believe it to be a unicorn when it isn't, but it seems to sort of fit. However, I do feel there's a certain amount of delusion here, you know, and I feel this needs to be sort of looked into with really putting it in what it is, you know, and a lot of people may sort of disagree with my statement, but is it the blind leading the blind? You know, are we in the realms of fraudulent mediumship here? You know what I mean? We know, you know, through documented history, as you say, unicorns don't exist. So,
or never have.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, the thing is it a side view of a Bronte book, or is it, as you say, a rhino just getting it from the front angle, got one horn, unicorn, suddenly becomes unicorn. And I just feel here, it's very much about people needing to believe there's something there. And I feel people latch onto it. Maybe it's what they want to hear. They like unicorns, and it just leads from there to one, two, or two. But really, I feel they may be getting information from a different source, and they believe that source to be a unicorn.
Okay, I'm going to act as devil's advocate. How can you say then that mediumship isn't a delusion, and that it's not just people deluding themselves? I mean, I've got an answer for that, but I'm going to let you answer first.
No, I mean, it's questions like this that we want to answer, we want to have a talk about, and the way that I sort of look at it there, now this is from a medium's point of view, I would count myself very, very fortunate. I do see dead people, where, if I can use that word dead, I do see people in a very clear way, that nobody else can, or people, if there's another medium, they might sense the same. And it's giving that evidence is what the person is, where the evidence would not be known to that medium. So, for instance, that person isn't just a made-up faction, and it comes up to just being lucky guessing in a psychic way as to what you're picking up off the person you're trying to give the evidence to. So if it's not in the mind of the medium, where does it then come from? And I feel here that there is a certain amount of, what you call it, delusion when mediums are first setting foot on their development. I've got a child here, when you're thinking, no, actually, there isn't anybody there, but they are believing there, and I feel partly it's in our own makeup. I once had a person who I was helping them to develop their mediumship, and they always wanted to work with children. When they were trying to think, okay, let me link up, I'll do this, it was always a child. So I feel it's partly in their sort of makeup, and it comes with feelings, and I do feel that the medium really does need to hone their feelings. It's, when they give that information out, it's the feeling that comes with it, not when the person says yes or no, because you can still get that feeling, and you can say, well, actually, I know this information is right. The person having the reading then goes away, checks, and it turns out to be right. It's all about that, and I do feel that's why mediums, there's such an onus there, where development should be practice and practice and practice and practice, no sort of doubt. And I do feel through all the documented evidence that there is cases there where are very, 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 very notable that there is an energy, a memory, a consciousness outside our physical world that is able to talk, give evidence of them to a physical world. So that's the way I would sort of put over it.
I think for me, again, coming from this questioning side, where I've kind of done both sides of the coin, but for me, the reason why this isn't a delusion is because of evidence. And in science, you collect evidence. And from my own personal view, where I've given readings, whether it was yesterday, and yesterday I was doing a tarot reading, and that's predictive. I'm predicting the future. I'm predicting what might happen.
Yeah.
And then suddenly I was aware of a lady came through, and I said to the lady who I was giving a reading to, she'd not mentioned any of her family, not talked about any of her family. All we was talking about was her business prospects. And I said, oh, right. I said, I've got a lady here. I said, she's quite tough. She's got grey hair. It's quite long, straggly. I said, and she's saying her name's Liz. But you can call her Grandma. And she went, oh my God. She said, my grandma. She said, it was Liz. Yeah, she said, that's my grandma, Liz. How do you know she's there? Well, she's here in front of me now as I'm talking to you. And how could I have known that her grandma was called Liz, that she got this grey straggly hair? She'd actually, when she appeared to me, she was wearing this pink dressing gown with what looked like little tassels on there. She said, oh, it was a bloody awful thing. She never took it off. And she said to me, my memory that I always remember about her was one night, it was pouring down with rain. She was upset. She knocked on her grandma's door and said, oh, can I come in? She said, no, you can't. She said, because I'm watching Coronation Street. I've got a box of Black Magic chocolates open, and I'm sitting down in my dressing gown. She said, it's my night. She said, you can go home. And so she said, I knocked on the door again. She said, go on, come in. She said, but you can only eat the Turkish delights because I can't stand them. And the thing is, when you get evidence like this, and Ian, you've had countless evidence. I've seen the huge amount of evidence over the years. You have to question Where has this come from? Okay, so let's say, oh, it's psychic. Oh, right, so we're reading people's minds then, are we? Do you know, we're giving information like Liz, that she wore a pink dressing gown with tassels on there, or with Ian. Ian did an investigation with us at Sedgemoor, which we've talked about. Ian was stood in a field, a wet, damp field, in the middle of the night, and said, "I can see here a wagon. It looks like it's exploded. I can see it's gone in all sorts of directions and that sort of thing." And there was an archaeologist on site with us, and he said, "We've just done ground radar in this field within this last 2 weeks, hadn't he?" And he was waiting for the full results. But they had found what looked like, and it was at least 3 to 6 feet below ground, was a wagon that looked like it had been exploded. There was a wheel in one area, there was planks in another, and it was scattered. How could Ian have known that information?
Yeah, another thing as well, Martin, when you talked about the divination, you're doing the tarot and you're doing a future business, then when you're looking at how we're getting the thoughts, or are we mind reading the person we're sitting for, when you give precise evidence, oh, by the way, you're going to be doing this, and this. I recall, I think it was last week, I was giving a person a reading and she was asking about her ex-husband. She was concerned about him. And I said, nothing to worry about. He's going to meet a woman called Carol and they're going to be fine. She rang me up about 3 weeks later. Oh my God, I've been talking to him. He said he's just got involved with a woman and her name's Carol. Now, if it's not in her mind, where did the information come from? Seeing you work, when we've been on the paranormal side of things, when you turn around, you give a message to a woman, or I can recall walking into Burton Constable with you, and you walked in this room and you mentioned, oh, there's a bloke here, looks like blah 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 blah. There's loads of boxes and there's this and this. And the person walking around with us said, oh my God, how would you know that? Because that's how the person was. He got all his stuff here, and she went into it all, and I thought, wow, but again, you're picking up a memory from a place or whatever. But how would you know? Because when you see certain TV programs of the same ilk, it's always the king, the queen, or the owner of the house that comes through. When you got all the staff, all the guards if you're at the castle, but to come in and see some very, very pertinent point of view, because the room we were in was absolutely jaw-dropping. There's everything's in place and it was beautiful. So how would you see that? So there's those side of things. Where does this information come from?
Well, the first thing a skeptic would have said about that room was you would have imagined, because the room was, if I remember, I can't remember if it was a bedroom, or whether, but it was, there was gilt, wasn't there? There was kind of gold flecks on the wall, and there was a fireplace. It looked incredibly grand. But all I remember seeing was kind of the old tea chests full of papers and things stacked up everywhere, and there was a guy in army uniform. I mean, that's what I was being seen, what I could see, and you've inspired me, Ian, where I've worked with you, where you have to show exactly what you see. You can't fudge around it or try and interpret it, because that's where mediums go wrong, isn't it?
Yes, it is. But it comes through practice, what it's, again, feeling. People get a lot of symbology, they get a lot of little bits and pieces, and they try to make sense of it when, let's say, for instance, this one's made up. It's not a genuine one, as in, it's not happened to me. I don't think it's happened to you, Martin. You could be talking to a person and saying, oh, all I'm getting is a red shoe, and you could be trying to analyse, or perhaps you need to get some red shoes, perhaps you need this, when the person might say, well, no, I've lost a red shoe, I've only got one, I'm trying to find the other one. So I know it's simple, but at the end of the day, it's give what you get, and as it is, because it's really bizarre when for instance, when we were back at Sedgemoor, I remember looking over this one area and my jaw must have dropped or something, because Martin was saying to me, Ian, what's up? And I just saw there was a bloke all in red, which I do feel in hindsight was Charles II. And then there was, I can't remember the name of the bloke, but I've got it all documented, who was in charge of all the sort of cavalry. And I could just see them going back for, there must have been 500 horsemen, all mounted, all dressed the same. And honestly, if I could have a photograph where I can just print it from my brain to the printer, honestly, it was jaw-dropping, but it was all verified that that's where they were, that's the commander, and it was all there. But it's that type of thing where I just wish I could, where there was a situation where if I was a really accomplished artist, where you could draw it all and just paint the scene. So yeah, you need to say things exactly as they are.
Thank you, Ian. Some great advice there and insight into how the mediumship mind works. So this ends our podcast for this week. Or this month. We've not quite decided what the format's going to be, but if you're listening to this on iTunes or any other format, please please subscribe, please tell your neighbour's cat about it, and join us again when we come back and we talk about our lives as mediums in action.